When the Canucks miss the playoffs again.
When Jim Benning trades away all our picks.
When Goldalden is scratched for the third game in a row. C4 is there. With Sedin-like vision, Horvat's work ethic, and Petey's electric personality. Here comes the C4 Canucks Hockey Podcast with Chris, Matt, Anna, and Adam.
Powered by Overtime Media.
Welcome to another episode of the C4 Canucks Hockey Podcast, as heard currently on the Overtime Media Network and on CanucksHockeyBlog.com. I'm Chris at Lightforce, joined virtually by Anna Forsyth at 84603, Matt Lee at MattLee_61. Adam is still recuperating, but you can find Adam Obanel Carter at AdamFOC on the Twitters. I didn't join the two of you last week because it was Baby Force's birthday, but I am here this week.
Yeah, as we discussed, not so much Baby Force anymore.
No, Toddler Force, yeah. I mean, she's grown up. I still call her my baby boo. And if I were to ask her who, my baby boo is, she says, Ari!
Well, that's cute.
Does she know that you've now renamed her Toddler Force?
Well, I haven't. She's Baby Force until, until
but
they can.
Did she get called Ari Force?
No, Baby Force.
How about Ari Force in the future, though?
No. I mean, she wants to call herself that totally, but I won't. And I'm the dad, so I get to set the rules, yo.
All right.
Don't say yo.
Yeah, please don't say yo. Your old man jokes.
Oh, cringe.
Oh, you guys have missed me.
Yeah, sure.
So, I mean, fortunately I was here so we could actually find a technology that would allow us to get together and record an episode tonight. I mean, I don't know what's going on in the world of, Matthias Oleand.
Yeah, so those behind the scenes tried for about a good 45 minutes to make this work, and we're using the backup option. Is it Plan C on the list? I don't even know.
Yeah, Plan C for us. I mean, this is the software we're using here. The application is what I use for the Vancouver Titans podcast. You never like me talking about. It's pretty slick.
Yeah, it's too fancy for us. It feels weird.
Yeah, I mean, we've got cameras. Anna and I can see each other. Matt, unfortunately, not a friend of technology. Couldn't turn his camera on.
However, you can see a very nice map of the Lower Mainland instead.
Yeah, it's very pretty. But I just realized that me and Chris are matching. So we're both in blue. Are you also wearing blue, Matt? Please paint us.
Actually, I seriously am wearing blue at this point.
Wow.
There you go.
We color coded without even knowing it. That's how great our chemistry is. I am Elias Pettersson, and you both are JT Miller and Brock Besser.
Oh, who's who?
I'll let you guys figure it out. But we all know Pettersson's the straw that stirs the old drink around the three of us.
All right.
Oh man! After the episode the two of you had last week, and Matt got to sit down with the Drancer, and this episode's going to be a complete wash for people looking for actual hockey talk. We totally got off the good foot here, but what are we going to cover this week? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the potential that the NHL is sort of entertaining of a return over the course of the summer. I know we talk about this each and every episode, but sort of more and more news trickles out as sort of we're going on. We're going to talk a little bit about the possibility of a virtual NHL entry draft, what that might look like. And if the NHL does return, what would the no crowd experience, be in not only, terms of us as sort of, fan consumption, but also, for the players themselves. And, really, we're going to also have a little fun because would be an episode with me that was not fun. I think the episodes with Chris are also the funnest.
Yeah, they're funner for us anyway.
So let's go into Rewind. So the NHL has positioned itself as possibly coming back over the course of the summer. They've been exploring this concept of hub cities. There would be like 4 cities throughout North America. I'm going to presume maybe 2 in Canada, 2 in the US. But the idea being that the teams in sort of each geographical region would then, sequester themselves in a hub city. And in that hub city, they might play multiple games over the course of a day. A team wouldn't play like tournament style where they got 2 games. They might play like on a Friday, a Saturday, and then maybe on the Monday or something like that. But the idea would there be multiple games in these single locations over the course of each day. And then for a hub city to actually function, the COVID-19 pandemic would have to be, much less of an issue in that location. So like the likelihood of NHL hockey going to New York City, slim to none.
Mm-hmm.
And then there has to be a number of practice facilities. Thoughts on this concept that the NHL is kicking around?
It's tricky, hey? Like, it just seems like a long way off where a city is able to operate at that capacity of an influx of players, just the testing that would be required to make this work, especially as, like, every US state and every Canadian province is in such a different stage when it comes to, like, how they're coping.
And can we also talk about how now I don't know if this has changed since the weekend, but I had seen an early report that suggested Toronto and Edmonton were two of those hub cities that were being floated in Canada. And given the fact that Toronto and in Ontario in general, they have been hit harder than probably most provinces, I found that very curious that Toronto, of course, the center of the universe, is being considered as one of those hub cities.
Well, it is definitely odd. Like let's look at the Canadian example. There are 3 provinces that are currently dealing, with COVID-19 more than the others. The province of Quebec just head and shoulders above others. Ontario and BC. So if the NHL goes and suggests that the pandemic is either under control or being mitigated or the effects of it, you're right. I don't understand how Toronto fits the bill. I mean, I'm sure they have enough of facilities to make it happen, but why not? If they're going to go to Edmonton and they're not going to do Calgary, why not do Winnipeg? Because they're not going to go to Montreal. Toronto and Ottawa should be out of the picture, and then Vancouver technically too.
Yeah, I mean, Vancouver is in the best place out of all the big provinces you mentioned, but I don't think, one, that it's a great place in terms of facilities. Like, it's still a West Coast city, and we have fewer facilities than everyone. And yeah, it does make sense to me to go with somewhere that's still a big Canadian city, like Edmonton or Winnipeg, but isn't hit as hard, doesn't have as many people. I mean, can you imagine, like, Vancouver, the population is pretty big, but like it would be by an influx of teams that would definitely have an impact, you'd think.
The thing though to keep in mind, and I mean it's a combination of they need essentially ice time, so there does need to be practice facilities. That's I think the catch here is it's not so much rinks for games to take place; it's the actual practice opportunity. You also need the infrastructure to support teams, from a hotel perspective. I can't imagine the NHL is going to go and put the teams in a hotel 6. So are there available rooms? And you might suggest, there should be, because who's staying in them? Well, a lot of hotels are shutting down. So
yeah, and how do you control that? Do you like test every staff member in the hotel?
Well, they've already conceded that a positive test for a player and even a positive test for a couple players won't be enough to shut this sort of hub city concept down. So if they're already accepting that the players who are going to be in close contact, swap and sweat, because it's just the nature of the game, isn't enough to shut down? Well, are they all that concerned about hotel staff on the front desk or the, who's, covering the rooms or whatever? It's, I get the idea. You want to return to the game, but I'm wondering if they're not putting the cart in front of the horse here.
I definitely think that you're right. And, we discussed this as much with Drancer at the end of the episode last week, is that there are just so many hoops and hurdles that the NHL has to jump over and through to try and make this happen. But at the same time, I think we're also looking at all the risks involved, but maybe not necessarily looking at the rewards that could be involved. If I'm not mistaken, like the NBA and Major League Baseball, neither of these leagues have made serious public statements about their aspirations to return to play anytime soon. If the NHL is able to do this and do this the right way, I do think that there is an economic benefit to the game to be had here by being able to offer some form of entertainment to fans that are just dying for something to happen these days.
Yeah, and I think you're right, and we don't want to necessarily poo-poo this stage. It's just concepts, right? And they're just going to keep having to react to how the situation develops. So in order to be ready at whatever point it's safe, you have to have this whole plan in place. So even if it's not quite like we're not ready for that yet, they have to have thought this out. So I think it's definitely worth exploring. It's just whether it's gonna be practical. I mean, in 2 weeks' time, the Bundesliga is coming back, supposedly, in Germany. But they're at a totally different stage and setup and scale, most importantly. Like, the scale that NHL is operating on is way bigger.
Yeah, I mean, you consider the North American sports market. Right now, there is this sort of massive cherry that each one of these leagues is chasing after. They all want it. They want that to be theirs. And I get that, because as a fan of sports, I'll concede, when I heard that in Taiwan they're going to have baseball games without crowds. I mean,
they had it with paper cutouts, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and like
yeah, I've seen that in Germany too.
Yeah, and the first thing I thought, I wonder if like Sportsnet or TSN could get like the rights to put that on TV. Like before Aussie Rules football shut down, I was actually watching the matches. I had absolutely no clue what was going on, because that was just pure madness. But I just needed sports. It was just have it on in the background as sort of almost like background noise, but it provides some level of comfort. So you think about it, like whether it be baseball, NASCAR, basketball, whomever, hockey, they all want to find a way to return. And if this hub city concept is sufficient enough for the NHL to do it, wouldn't they want to have that captive audience that just wants sports?
Oh, totally. Another concern, though, to mention is like what would be like the strain on like local medical to put that on, because one of the things they're talking about in football back home is that you need an ambulance at every single Premier League game, like at least one ambulance. So like, and no one wants to do that right now. But yeah, it's not just like the positive test. It's not just a COVID-19 threat, but like if, just the threat of injury goes way up, and like, is the health system able to cope?
To be fair, I believe NHL already mandated that there would be an ambulance at every NHL game, even before the pandemic. So it's not that it makes a difference, but I know that was already a rule in place. And just going back to what Chris mentioned, just to add things along, there's already some precedent here about what kind of opportunity the NHL has. Looking at the NFL draft from just last week, it was the most watched NFL draft of all time. And I think that the NHL has noticed this, and they've noticed that there is the possibility, again, that they can capture a big market that wasn't necessarily there before the pandemic started.
So did you watch the draft, Matt?
Oh, yeah.
What was it like? Was it weird?
I mean, we could talk about that once we talk about the NHL draft, because I know we're going to talk a little bit about the virtual nature of the NFL or the NHL draft, and maybe some key learnings from the NFL draft. But I mean, getting back to our original topic, I mean, I think that the NHL they're not jumping into this, I think, without any reckless abandon for the current situation. I think the NHL knows the situation. They know that it's still very early days, and I think that's why they haven't put any dates for any sort of return to play. But, if they can do this carefully and do it the right way, you could see hockey in some limited fashion in an empty stadium in 4 hub cities, and I think you could still see a Stanley Cup awarded maybe at some point in August or September.
Yeah. I mean, again, it just seems so early to be talking about it, but as you say, we have to think about these plans, and you just don't want to get caught up in the race for first, right? Be the first sport to be back if the plans aren't right.
Well, that's it. You want to be the first one back, but you want it to be back and you want to stay back. You don't want it to be I'm back and we're gone, because at that point you have to wait for others to sort of provide proof. We'll talk more about this possibility of the virtual draft, but on the note there sort of that you raise, Matt, the appetite for sports is rabid. I mean, NASCAR has actually seen some tangible benefit in essentially marketing their racers racing virtually. That's because people just want to see sport. So I think the NHL is in a tough spot. I think they have obviously owners who want a resumption of something, and we know how much money TV revenue brings in. Now the television networks who have already sort of prepaid, obviously, they want ad revenue, and how do you get ad revenue? It's the eyeballs. I think there's just this pressure on all sides. Now the other part is the actual health of the athletes, and then all the people that are involved. And I'm not suggesting the NHL is taking that lightly, but they're looking for ways to maybe get an easier path. And all we have to do is look at what's going on in the United States right now with sort of this piecemeal approach where in some states they're like, yeah, no problem. It's totally okay to go get your hair cut or go to the salon or go to the beach or, party because you got to restart the economy. I don't know if the NHL or really any professional league needs to worry about restarting their sport. The fans will return.
Right. And this is a little off the rails, but you talking about the NASCAR drivers doing virtual competitions.
Yeah.
Actually, in cricket, there's a cricket magazine that is running a virtual championship, and they're getting players from each team to play as their team on this, cricket video game, and they're getting legit commentators like that you would normally get on the radio and TV to commentate on the games, and it's been brilliant. So honestly, just as a midway step, if they got actual players to play against each other as their teams, like in a tournament on NHL, I would watch that. And I hate video games, but I would watch that.
The concept of commentators, though, like that part kind of
watch that, like having John and John call an NHL 20 game.
That's the thing. Like, it's easier for them because they would be able to recognize the numbers and the players, but like the AI would almost get in the way. But I'm not gonna suggest it's not possible. Like there's maybe some value to be had there.
I don't know just to bring back that rivalry and competitiveness.
I am so done with simulations and stuff like that these days. It was cool for a hot minute, and since then I want the real thing back in my life.
I mean, you're right. We all want that, but
I think we all can acknowledge that there's still a lot to be finalized and a lot to be ironed out. And I'll also add that I think you're never going to get 100% buy-in from the NHLPA on this. I think it's almost virtually impossible to get every single player in the NHLPA to say, oh, I'm good with playing in a hub city. I'm good with playing in front of empty arenas. I'm good with, literally risking my life to play the game. But, luckily we're not the ones making those decisions.
Yeah. I mean, what do you do there if you don't get buy-in from the NHLPA?
Well, that's the thing. If you don't get buy-in from the PA, you don't have a late. Like they're
the whole product.
Yeah, the PA isn't going to make a decision until the NHL comes to them with a tangible plan. And we don't know what that may look like, or if the NHL has reached a point where they can see a tangible plan even being formed. Now, if you are the PA, how likely are the players going to want to put themselves into this position? I can't imagine they'll simply, let's do it. But we also don't know the details of the contract and how the CBA would be applied. Like, I mean, we talked about this on previous episodes. Right now, for all intents and purposes, players are no longer under contract as of June 30 if they happen to become a free agent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there needs to be an exception granted to allow for the NHL and through the PA to allow these players who are no longer contract to continue playing. I mean, that alone is an issue. And again, we don't know what the resumption would look like. Is it going to go into like a playoff tournament? And is there, with the postseason, like there's so much crazy.
I'm just surprised that we haven't heard more about that, like out of contract players, because surely that's the first thing to figure out, even if it's just a tangential, like just a temporary solution. Like it seems weird that that's coming up pretty fast and they haven't figured out what's going to happen with that.
Well, it's an issue that you have to resolve if you actually have a season.
Because it's not starting before then, right?
No, I mean, ultimately, if let's say the NHL were to decide there is no season, like we're just going to, this is an asterisk, it's a stoppage beyond anyone's control. See you next fall. Then really there's probably not much more they have to go to the PA about. Now there's still the financial side of things, escrow, what have you. And I think I had read, and I really wish I had the source in front of me, but I had read that the PA had agreed to have the sort of the last paycheck held, so that if the revenues are down, and they will be, that it could maybe be an agreement where like, okay, you know what, hold on to that. There wasn't hockey, and we'll use that to reduce escrow for the following season. Like again, there's just so many question marks, and it's not just the NHL; it's every league. But it's just the way things are. I'm curious though. Let's say they do play another. Let's say kind of some more agreement. What will that look like? No crowd hockey.
I'm kind of excited about the prospect of playing with no crowds.
You said this before. It's weird.
Like it could be kind of like an HBO thing where you get maybe some uncensored hockey. You get kind of, you feel a little closer to the ice than you've ever felt before. I mean, I don't know how many games you guys have ever been to where you're right along the glass or behind the bench, but I'd imagine that the feel would be somewhat similar to that. And if anything, it's more of a marketing tool for the NHL. And maybe I'm just trying to look at it from a glass half full perspective, but it's a unique glimpse into the game that you don't often see because of the crowd noise that you have in packed arenas.
I'm not saying this to make fun of them, but have you guys ever been to like a Panthers game or something like that? Like,
not in Florida.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, have you been to a game where it's been half empty? I've been to like a quiet Giants game, I guess, but it's not quite the same thing.
Well, no, but like even at a half empty building, there's still this buzz. Like it's the sort of the static or the white noise of people having conversation, right? I think what Matt's pointing out though is in a silent building, it's essentially a hockey game. Doesn't matter what they do. If they have a microphone that is live in that building, it's going to pick up
F's
something
and
that's
Jeffs,
dead.
to put it mildly.
So I mean, I actually, to that extent, kind of think it is a neat experience. It's just, it will be different. And I'm not against it. I mean, I'm not at all upset that I'd get to hear more and get a glimpse in a game that I don't necessarily get all the time.
Yeah, I think the novelty might wear off, but like it, as you say, like it's way better than nothing. It's way better than no hockey at all. So I would gladly take it, and yeah, I might enjoy the difference at least for a little bit. But I feel like there'd need to be more. The NHL would need to do something to add another element to it. I don't know what that is though.
Yeah. I mean, just before we wrap up this conversation, at the end of the day, I am, this close to watching competitive dog races for all I care. So at this point, I would welcome almost anything in terms of sports these days. I am enjoying The Last Dance though on Netflix lately.
Oh, I haven't started that.
Not at all.
All
Dead
right.
to me.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Let's take a break, and we'll come back. We'll talk a little bit about the business side of the NHL and what might happen to the NHL entry draft.
Take hitting out of the game. You can't hit anymore, so don't do it.
The unsportsmanlike conduct, I want to get an explanation on it.
No kidding.
Because how do you get suspended for unsportsmanlike conduct?
Plus interference. There's no interference there. He had the puck.
Now, Madison never ever did that before. Now, why did he do it? Because he was mad.
Well, your early favorite for the Calder Trophy, that's for sure. Elias Pettersson, you might even say your early favorite for the Hart Trophy.
Just to get back to your question, Elias is going to play plenty. He's going to get a lot of power play time, and yeah, I'm concerned about our offense. We lost 200-point players, and we've got to find a way to score.
We touched on it in the last segment, but the NFL went to a complete virtual draft, and while there were some hiccups, for instance, Vegas was awarded the 2020 NFL draft, which is interesting because this was the 2020 NFL draft they were supposed to have. It's actually 2022. The only other issue I think that really impacted the draft was the slight delay in player notifications, though we got a much better glimpse into these players themselves, was how ESPN approached some of the deep dive information, because they needed to create filler that would normally not be required. And man, they went next level, Inspector Gadget on some of these players, broke all bones in his ankle. Mom has been on, the streets dealing with addiction and drives a Ford Buick, which is not even a car, but like that. It was crazy. That was my take on some of the later draft rounds, because it was like, if there was a detail about you that was somehow, if it bleeds, it leads, it made it into the
no
player.
kidding. I mean, from an overall perspective, and I know the NFL draft, again, like we mentioned, smashed a lot of audience records, but for the most part, it was very uninspiring aside from the picks that were carried out the way they were. You had Joe Burrow went first overall to the Cincinnati Bengals, the very first overall pick. You would think that there comes a lot of fanfare and stuff like that, but because of the fact that this wasn't a big grand event held, in Las Vegas like it should have been, it lacked a lot of that razzle dazzle that you normally get from these types of events. I'm very skeptical as an avid lover of the NHL draft about how a virtual NHL draft would be in terms of entertainment. For me, as such a draftist, it wouldn't be able to dampen the overall experience of seeing which players go to where. But the NHL draft is always cool for those kind of moments that players have with their families and the other prospects that are involved, and you see all the whispering happening at every club's table. If we do a virtual draft, I'm going to miss not being able to see Jim Benning picking up the phone every time and thinking he's pulled off some sort of stupid trade.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting having been at the draft last year for the first time. And that was super exciting. It was so cool to be there, but like, you do miss out on all the stuff you get from the TV, all the interviews and expert opinion and stuff like that. So I just wonder if like that's what a virtual draft is going to be like, because there's a lot of waiting around in between. I don't know.
The waiting around in between, I think they could deal with. We would get more sort of in studio analysis now, how they would set up the studios so that social distancing was a thing. I don't know. Like, you think about like TSN and how they do their, trade deadline concept. They've got like 20 people in the same studio, all different desks. Now they can have maybe 3 people at 3 desks. But I'm not against the virtual concept in so much as it's actual real time, because let's go to how the NHL entry draft positions in the draft lottery are shown. I mean, that lottery is a done deal, and as we have been apt to see, it leaks prior to the actual draft. So like the dramatic nature of it is taken away.
Yeah, but I think it does show that it is possible. But yeah, it would have to have a really agile host and expert panel, that's for sure.
Well, it would be CBC Sportsnet because of rights. Then would have something. They would be reacting in the same amount of time as we would be. It would be just a different concept. I think the bigger question for me is, if let's say they do go with the virtual draft, is that draft going to happen prior to the conclusion of the season? And if so, how is draft order set up? Like, I mean, I don't know how you address that.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. I mean, it's in a way, it's like if you could do something virtual, it's good to like satiate some of that appetite for sport and get people excited for the future. And it's much safer than playing. But yeah, that's such a huge problem, is that you can't do anything before.
Well, I actually wonder if they would treat this kind of like they did with a locked out season, where, okay, we don't actually have a true metric to determine who gets to pick every which way. So let's do a full lottery. We'll take your winning percentage position, or whatever the heck you might want to define it as, putting you into some form of draft order, and ultimately have the Oilers or whomever, I guess it would be the Penguins if it was the repeat history, get the first overall pick. But I think the challenge the NHL faces is one, I mean, the resumption of play if it were to happen. Two, if it goes in the straight in the playoffs, like how do we determine playoff order? Is it a tournament play-ins, what have you? And then when it comes to draft order, like outside of, handful of teams, it's far too close to really call. So I think there needs to be some form of massaging of order. And on top of it, Stanley Cup winner is the team that picks last. Doesn't matter what their record was going in.
Right, that's a hard thing. I mean, looking at last year, St. Louis, like, they would, if we went by, like, end of season, they would have had a somewhat higher draft pick, and then everyone would be real mad if St. Louis picked first in the draft, and then, not first, sorry, but, like, middle of the draft, and then went on to win the Cup.
Yeah, so I don't know what you do with the conditional picks. I mean, especially for the Vancouver Canucks with having the JT Miller trade tied to that first round pick. It's very interesting. I mean, would it not be a possibility that the NHL considers a 31 team NHL lottery, kind of like what they did, Chris, in, what was it, 2005 for the Crosby draft? And we remember that draft being based on like whether or not a team had been to the playoffs from the last 3 seasons. I feel like the NHL probably has to get a little creative and maybe consider the fact that it's just very difficult to determine picks based on standings. And, similarly, if the Stanley Cup playoffs don't happen, those last few picks are also determined by the playoffs. So, I mean, for me, the fairest way seems to be to have some sort of extended lottery based on standings and maybe playoff appearances from the last 3 years.
In that case, if the lottery was done like that, whether it was done by like points percentage or current standings, either way, Canucks are giving up a like midway pick-ish. Would you rather give that up, like, a chance that we would do worse next year, or?
Well, let me put it this way: I don't think this team is going to be any worse next season, but I don't know either.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's really think they ought to get better. That's the thing. The core should get better, right? But it's players like, if we are still hanging on to Brandon Sutter, is he going to get better? No. Like, if we still have Louis, he's not going to get any better. That, if we still have the same defense.
Well, so I guess, the question that we can't answer, but let's, hypothetically do. If the Vancouver Canucks have to give up the pick, would it be this season or would it be next? I think if the season does not resume and all those conditions don't apply, the Vancouver Canucks are giving up the pick next year. I think that's how the NHL would enforce that.
Yeah, because it's the wording that, like, if the Canucks make the playoffs?
Make the playoffs. If they make the playoffs, if the Canucks make the playoffs, that pick is then given up. And because next year would just have to happen, regardless of what occurs, right? So I think, I kind of feel that the NHL would defer that to next year's draft, regardless of sort of what happens.
I think you're probably right, because, I mean, even if the playoffs started now, we'd only get in by points percentage. Mm-hmm. But, like, I assume that the playoffs have to occur for us to make them.
Well, no, and that's my thought logic.
Yeah.
There. The other thing, though, is let's say hypothetically they do go with sort of what they did with the lockout draft, where it is, based on last 3 seasons performance, whatever it is, and it's a full-on, full league lottery. I mean, if that were to occur, then conditions don't apply. Like, I can't see a team where there's a deferral, able to then have the ability to say, we'll take it or not. Like, I just feel the only way a condition is enforced is if it was to occur regardless. Like, you've given up your first round pick in this entry draft. That's a done deal. Doesn't matter based on playoff position. It's not a protected pick, what have you. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. I mean, Tampa didn't even want the pick anyway. They gave it to New Jersey, so I think we should get to keep it.
What are your thoughts, Matt?
I feel that the Canucks should make. I think the league should make it a team option.
Really? Like which team though?
What do you
Like
mean by that? Like,
On the
that
Canucks part.
sure. But you can't just, like, let teams decide for themselves, can you?
Could it be where if the. I mean, the deal was made with the Lightning, so could there be. I don't know. This is where we go real deep down the rabbit hole, but could there be an option where if the Lightning were to give the option to the Canucks on whether to keep or defer, the Canucks would have to give in an added compensatory pick?
But
Oh my god, that just makes it even more complicated, doesn't it?
Oh, it probably does. But, I mean, it's... If you're not deciding based on some sort of lottery system about if the Canucks are in the playoffs or not in the playoffs, then what else options are there at the table?
I don't know. I just don't see the Vancouver Canucks looking to give up more picks for the opportunity to make further determination like that. And that does seem like a very NHL thing to do, though. Like I'll give you that the credit for that. There's some crazy scenario to make up for X, Y, and Q.
Yeah. You just hope logic prevails, but that doesn't seem necessarily like an NHL thing.
Yeah. Oh well, I mean, time will tell. I mean, the one thing that we have made quite clear is this is all hypothetical because we truly don't know what will occur. I think the NHL first and foremost wants to determine, are we going to actually resume play? From there, the trickle down effect. Well, what does it have an effect on free agency? Effect on the NHL entry draft? The resumption of next season? And we've sort of touched on this in previous episodes. Like, what does next season look like? I mean, for all intents, it sounds as if there will be another flu season, and functionally, until there is a vaccine, a strong likelihood of another potential pandemic or resumption. Presuming it doesn't actually, if it does end and come back, there's just so many question marks. We're in a generationally different period of time that the NHL was around during the Spanish flu, but it was a whole different NHL.
You're like 100% right about the huge number of questions and things to sort out. My feeling more and more is that it seems to me that the contracts is the biggest issue. Like, that happens first. Like, I just don't think we'll get an answer about how and when we can resume before.
Contracts are first. You're right. Like, the NHL and the PA have to come to an agreement, but the PA, I'll be frank, I think the PA is just sitting back saying, yeah, you just pay us. We're all good. Like, their desire to modify remuneration is based around escrow, right? Like, what does it mean down the road? I'm positive the PA is willing to work, but they're not going to necessarily come by and start saying, here's everything that you should do. They're probably more passive partners in this conversation, waiting for the NHL to come to them with a plan. Because to use those magical words I use time and time again, it's going to cost you, Chief. That's
oh, there it is.
They'll want, but you understand what I'm saying. The PA is going to use this as a negotiating piece, just like the NHL will too. I mean, it's no different than the NHL saying, "Oh, we'll go to the Olympics if you give us a labor peace for a period of time." Everything's up for negotiation.
Yeah, you're right. And it comes back to what we talked about before about like risk, and if the players are going to risk a fair amount, give up a fair amount, like freedom-wise, if they're like going with this hub concept, they'll be away from home for a chunk of time. They won't be able to see their family. Like, they'll definitely use that as the negotiating piece to get them back playing.
Well, and I guess we never really even considered it. So let's say one of those cities is in Canada. As it stands right now, any of those players who are currently not in Canada, when they arrive, they must be in quarantine for 14 days. That is full on lock yourself down and sequester in a place. And I believe those rules will probably still be in place when the NHL decides to resume.
Yeah, I think like even if that isn't a legal requirement, I imagine that'll be a requirement of getting them back together again.
It'll be a requirement. Like the NHL may try to negotiate with the government saying, oh, well, they'll sequester in this hotel or they'll quarantine. Yeah, but quarantine rules are very, very, very specific. It is like, I go from where I am to where I need to be, and I close the door, and then I don't open the door for 2 weeks. That door remains.
Yeah, I do have a friend that just went through it by flying back to Sydney. And, yep, she stayed in one hotel room for 2 weeks, passed notes. Stuff was left outside her door. No one came in to clean it. Like, literally 2 weeks.
Unless the NHL gets a WWE style agreement like they have in Florida, where they declared an essential service.
Jesus Christ.
I don't think he was involved in that decision. Could be wrong. No. Anywho. What else do we want to talk about before we look to wrap things up? I think if I'm looking at the rundown here, you wanted to touch on all the fun the players are having.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting consuming stuff, through these Zoom media calls and Instagram and stuff like that. And obviously, this is a tough time for them. They'd rather be playing. But, some people are having more fun than others. And I just thought it was worth posing as a question. Who would you like to be your quarantine buddy? And I mean that, like, taking in the whole idea. Like, do you want to go to Minnesota, be out on the lake with Brock and his 2 dogs?
Yeah, Brock's having like
family.
the boys' trip to end all boys' trips, it seems like.
Yeah, it does seem that way.
He's out on the water, he's playing tennis, he's I think what else is he doing? He's doing a lot of things.
Inline skating.
Yeah, he's doing inline skating. Pettersson's working on his jump shot, apparently, from Sweden. # nailed it. You know the best one to be in quarantine?
Oh yeah, okay.
Former Stanley Cup champion Michael Del Zotto.
Why? That sounds like a living nightmare. Him doing DJ sets every night?
Yeah, that sounds like fun to me.
Oh God.
I just want to go off the rails a little bit. I stumbled across the David Guetta performance from like a couple weeks back on YouTube. Did it as a fundraiser, and it got me thinking, like, it'd be kind of cool, going out on your balcony if you live in like a condo, and every night firing up
every night though.
Well, maybe every few nights or whatever. I don't know. I can't do that here. One, all I have is me and farmland, and 2, I'm positive the other owners would be like lit up if I just throw on a Spotify playlist on the Bluetooth speaker. So
I dread to think what that would look like, Chris.
So I'm going to go with Matt. I'm totally wanting to hang out with MDZ.
Okay.
He seems like he'd be fun.
Because honestly, for me, like, I'm the biggest city kid ever. Everyone knows that I'm a city snob and I hate the countryside. But I think if I was quarantined, like, I can't have any fun in the city anyway. I think I want to be on the lake with Brock and Milo. Not Milo. Yeah, Milo and Cooley, his dogs. I think I'd want to do that.
Despite him having such a vanilla personality, as you put it?
Yeah, he wouldn't annoy me. He's so placid. Like, there's no way he could annoy me.
Would you annoy him?
Oh, I'm sure, but he doesn't get a say in this scenario.
Ah, well.
Antoine Roussel looks like he's fun with his kid and playing indoor hockey.
Yeah, but for me, no one with kids. Sorry, Chris.
It's a personal preference.
I love Baby Force. I love Baby Force, but
I can assure you that in this, 1 bedroom and den, there isn't anywhere near enough space for the 3 of us.
Yeah.
And so it's just the reality of no escape, no personal space, no personal time.
I would definitely rule out any player with kids. Sorry. Even if they have a dog. Maybe Zach McEwen. His dog's really cute.
Friend Zach McEwen, whose dog I ran into.
Who didn't save from an argument that you could have prevented.
Yeah, I still feel bad about that.
If you don't know what we're talking about, make sure you go back and listen to last week's episode.
Chris, did you hear the story?
No, I didn't.
Okay,
downloads, only listens.
Yeah, you need to listen again. But Matt was not a bro. Let's put it this way.
I listened to a few bits and pieces of the guy doing the production, so I had to actually listen. It was a long episode.
It was.
My podcast listening occurs normally on my commute. I have a ton of podcast episodes that are just stacking up. I just can't get through enough of them.
I'm actually getting through more though, even though I don't have a commute anymore. Because usually I cannot listen to podcasts during the day at work. Because now I can. No one's checking up on me.
Telling your supervisor.
Unless they listen to
C4, and then I'm screwed.
Be gentle, Anna's boss.
Nice, really.
Well, I think it's reached the point where we're completely going crazy. So it's been a long night. We had a lot of, as we said, technical troubles. Matt doesn't know how to computer.
My bad.
In fact, we had more technical troubles here, and you may or may not know when they happened. It'll be interesting how well I can post to produce this bad boy.
Yeah, that's a little Easter egg. If you can find the seam, join us on Discord and tell us.
And how do you get to Discord, Anna? Do you know?
Yes, you go on bit.ly/C4 Discord, all caps.
You got it.
Yes. It didn't even look like... but you can also get to it from our Twitter, which is at the C4 podcast. If it's a sappy, nice tweet, it's Chris. If it's a sassy tweet, it's me. There's been a few sassy tweets lately, so...
So I just want to, call to attention. I also monitor the @Canucks Hockey Twitter account. Now, JJ Guerrero, it's his essentially blog/personal account. He does most of the tweeting and whatnot. But occasionally I'll see something come in that's somewhat directed to the podcast, but it goes to @Canucks Hockey, which is perfectly fine. And so then I will go and I will engage and I'll try to redirect by including, at the C4 podcast. And I did that recently. And I positioned us as the Canucks podcast that likes those on the other side of the Atlantic more than any other. And apparently I created an awkward situation for some.
Well, it was tried to be argued that there was other podcasts that also included across the pond. But, I just had to say, you know what? Dude, come on. We have a British host. I think we win.
I teed it up, and you knocked it out of the park 6 times over.
Yeah, that's a 6, as we would say in cricket.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Matt's just writing press releases about people figuring out that they won the lottery on the crapper. I mean, I'll be honest. I wish I was when I was there was learning that I won millions of dollars too.
Let's be honest. Yeah. It's the dream, isn't it?
I don't really care where I happen to be when I win those millions. I will let you guys know where it was when I won the lottery. Trust me, you'll love to hear it.
Yeah, one day.
Yeah. So, what final words of wisdom do you wish to share to the millions and millions of C4 listeners that have continued to tune in throughout these very, down times? There's just no hockey, so we just make stuff up as we go. Matt, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for hockey to be back. A couple of things I want to put on my watch list is I think the Canucks put out the best of Quinn Hughes from the season. So that little 5-minute highlight reel I'm going to be watching later on this evening. I believe Dan Murphy did a catch-up with Elias Pettersson from Sweden. So I'm going to be watching that as well. So a little bit of Canucks content for those who have missed it in their feeds. Just dying for Canucks content these days. So looking forward to catching up with that. Not looking forward to watching games 4 and 5 of the Chicago 2011 series.
Who would? I don't understand why they want. I get show the whole series, but who really wants to relive that?
Yeah, that's the real completists games. Weird.
Game 6 was pretty good though. The one where Ben Smith scored the OT winner, but the butt was very clenched that night.
Why are we talking about Matt's butt again?
We were maximum clench in Game 7, though.
Mm-hmm. That's for sure.
I mean, I shared this in Discord in Game 7 when Chicago scored to push it to overtime. I was done. I was like, I had my head resting on the bar. All the like energy was gone. I was like a complete crash. And then when the Canucks scored and Burrows slayed the dragon, I nearly fell out of my chair and like passed out because suddenly that burst of energy, and it's like, whoa, brain can't handle this. And it's crazy times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was that whole series was the worst roller coaster ride I have ever been on in my life in a 7-game playoff series.
Yep, one with all the loop-de-loops. No,
Anna, your turn.
Yeah. Thanks for sticking with us, and I know it's going to be weird, but if we're not covering something that you think we should be covering during this pause, if there's a glaring issue you think we should be addressing, hop into Discord and pitch it to us, and we'll definitely cover it, but there'll be more exciting things to come as we speculate over what comes next. That's it, yeah.
Cool. As for me, I am going to latch on to the idea of getting more guests. I really enjoyed the transfer interview.
Yeah.
So if you think more guests, why don't you give us a suggestion? You want us to speak to Dan Murphy? You need to tell us we should speak to Dan Murphy, and then we can try to make that happen. I mean, we can't guarantee we'll be able to talk to everyone because Matt's pissed off a lot of people. They may not pick up the phone.
He has a lot of enemies.
But if this is something you want to hear more of, this is probably an opportunity for us to go and try to get people on. We have the technology. We might know how to use it.
Sometimes. Not today so much. Chris has a lot of patience with us.
Yeah. The concept, though, is sound. We think we can make it work. Anyhow, on behalf of the Missing Action, Adam Oblocar at Adam FOC, myself, Chris at Lightforce, Anna at A4603, and Matt Lee at MattLee_61. You're listening to the C4 podcast that's heard on the Overtime Media Network and the Canucks Hockey blog. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook. We're not on Instagram, nor are we yet on TikTok, but it's at the C4 podcast. We're easy to find. If you haven't already clicked that subscribe button in your podcast player, please do so. We're on pretty much every single one of them out there in the universe. And if we're not, please let us know, and I will make sure we were on there post haste. So thank you for again tuning in, and I will leave you with those magical 2 words of we out.